Hey guys, so I've got a 20-minute game on the board against an opponent rated 8-3-2 at rapid. So we have e4 and e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, very standard position. I'm going to play the Scotch, which is my normal approach, and he very quickly responds with f6. This gives me the option of pushing d5 and kicking the knight. The knight doesn't have many great squares to go to, so that's one idea. So I have two attackers on e5, but he has two defenders, so the exchange doesn't favour me. So I'm going to push d5 and kick the knight away. The most normal move, instead of c6 there, would be to capture on d4. And now we have another tactic, which is that when you've got one piece attacked, you can counterattack, but it's not sensible if there's a counterattack that counterattacks your counterattacking piece. Okay, so now black is in a situation where he's got two pieces being attacked by pawns and he cannot save them both. One option is to capture with the bishop on c3 with check, which would force me to basically recapture with the knight, but that's giving up a bishop for a pawn. So we're straight into basic chess tactics now, right from the opening. Got to follow opening principles. Okay, he's decided to run away with the knight. I'm just going to go ahead and grab the bishop. Don't need to give that bishop anywhere to go. And now c6. So a lot of sub 1000 players like to play pawn moves. You think that a pawn move is like a cheap or free move. It isn't. Pawn moves cannot be taken back. That's the problem. Once that pawn has moved forward, leaving these two squares less defended, it can't ever move back there to c7. So I'm going to go ahead and push d6. I'm going to kick this knight again and think, where can it go to? I mean, these squares are covered by his own pieces. This square can be taken by the pawn in this square. So really that is the only option that knight had. The question now is how to punish my opponent's opening mistakes. His king side is already looking a little bit open. I'm thinking maybe bishop to c4 would prevent the king from castling over there. This knight would first have to move out, and it can't go to there or there, so this would be its only square on h6. Not very appealing, because I can grab it with my bishop as well. So I think, yeah, develop the bishop to c4, prevent castling, and allow my own king to castle. Get my king to safety. Happy days. I hope these games that I play against sub 1000 players are instructive. That's the point of these. Okay, he has indeed moved his knight out there. I'm not really going to think twice. I'm going to grab that knight. I'm going to bust open his kingside. So now, any hope of castling kingside is really pretty much out of the window. And to castle queenside, what has he got to do? Well, first he's got to develop his queen and his bishop. Okay, right now the bishop has absolutely nowhere to go, so that means that one of these pawns would have to move. The d pawn cannot move, so it's probably going to have to be the b pawn, and for that to happen he's going to be opening up the queenside as well. So that's less than ideal. I have spied a possible tactic here, which is queen to b3 to back up this bishop along this long diagonal, and then bishop to f7 check with a fork on the knight. Now this isn't really about grabbing material, it's more about kicking the king off of e8 so that the king cannot castle, and then that king is going to be stuck out there in the open. I've got this horrible advanced pawn here that's really causing trouble for this queen and preventing the d pawn from advancing, so I'm going to go ahead and play that. That's my idea. Bishop f7 check. I also need to make sure I castle my own king at some point soon. I need ideas for my remaining knight. So it can come to c3 quite happily, but then these two squares are covered by the c pawn. Alternative is d2, but then again he's running into all of my pieces on light squares. So, oops, I don't want to pre-move that. Okay, so that's the last move. I'm waiting for my opponent to respond. He's already down a minor piece because of that double attack with the pawns. Just giving this some serious thought. So really following basic opening principles, only moving pieces once when you can. Might as well throw in this check, it costs me nothing, it's going to force the king to move. Control the centre of the board, don't leave pieces hanging. That will take you quite a long way in your openings. You don't need to remember loads of theory over openings, just pick a solid approach and stick with it. Learn what you have to do when you make a mistake, learn from your mistake. Okay. My first thought is castling. The king, I notice now, has no squares to go to. The king cannot move, so a check on that king now could actually be fatal. But I can't see an easy way to achieve that. I think castling now... Do I have to worry about this knight coming in? Not really. The queen's on a dark square, so looking at f2, whichever of these squares the knight comes to, it's going to be looking at g2, so it can't support the queen in an attack. I also have maybe knight to d2, partnering with this knight. So I think castling, it looks safe enough. We're going to go ahead with that. You can see here that although I'm playing a player who's 500 points below me, the rules of chess are the rules of chess. You know, if I make a stupid error, I could lose in one move. So it doesn't matter who you're playing, it doesn't matter whether you're playing somebody who's 500 points higher or 500 points lower, you've always got to put king safety first. Ignore king safety at your peril. So let me know if you guys like the live games or whether you prefer when I go over a previous game. Alright, so we have queen has moved forward to b5. Now, what options does this knight have coming in here? He's got a check, in which case it would kick my king away. I'm thinking that maybe knight to c3 it hits the queen to start with. Queen can't go there. Can't take the rook. So the queen might go to d3 or e2. Does that worry me? No, couldn't go to e2 because this knight would be covering e2. So the queen would probably move to d3. Now, is there anything funky I can do by moving my knight away? No, my knight's here, isn't it? Knight would be here. I can't see a tactic, an obvious tactic there, but I would like to move this knight. Is a3 any better? Well, at least with a3, a3 doesn't guard e2. That's one difference, but the other difference is that it doesn't block my queen's path to d3 either. I've also got a4. That kicks the queen. That might be a move. Let's do that. This king is not castling well, it's not castling at all because it's had to move. Right, so that king is going to find itself stuck in the middle of the board. It can't go here, it can't go here, it currently can't even go there. So when the king is that exposed, then I want to be busting open the middle of the board to get my teeth into that king. Got a potential idea of bishop to g8, queen to f7 where the bishop is. Now then I can't go here because the knight's currently guarding that. Okay, the queen's come in. This pawn is undefended. So I'm thinking maybe knight to d2 now defends that pawn, at least. I've then also got the possibility of bringing my knight round, maybe f1 g3 could be a possibility. Now I've got ideas of bringing one of my rooks to e1 to harass the queen, and the queen doesn't really have that many spaces to safe spaces to go to. There it gets captured by my queen, there it gets captured, there it gets captured. The queen's currently only safe square right now is actually a6, which is not great. So I'm thinking one of these rooks, probably rook f to e1, will act. Okay, and now I believe that the queen no longer has a safe square. So I'm just going to throw that move out there. Can't go here. Can't take there, can't take there because of the pawn, can't take there because of the knight, can't go there because of the pawn, can't go to any of these because of the rooks, can't go there because of the other knight, can't go there because my queen takes, can't go there because my knight takes, and that is it. Those are all the squares that the queen can move to, and every one of them is covered by one of my pieces. So what we're talking about now is a trapped piece. It's always worth including as part of your review of the board on every single move, if there are valuable pieces in your space particularly. Oh, that's a good move, well done. Okay, think what squares does that piece have available? Now I'm thinking if rook takes a4, now the queen then has b5, doesn't it? Okay, so I've got rook takes there. I could exchange queens now. That actually undoubles these pawns for black, so that's not particularly to my advantage. But that's a very, very creative response. I can capture with a rook because this rook is defended by the knight on f3. I could capture it also with a queen. I don't think the queen's opportunities from a4 are as good as where she is right now on b3. Right now on b3 we're looking at this nice long diagonal. On a4 we're looking at these light squared pawns, and that, you know, everything's kind of defended. So if I take the queen, let's play this through. I take the queen, recaptures. I can recapture with a knight. That knight from there can now go into there. That looks sensible. I'm well ahead in material. I'm still a minor piece up. Now a4 takes the queen, and then knight captures b3. I've castled, my opponent can't. That's another strength, another imbalance in the game. Okay, let's grab the pawn. My knight's going to come in now. Right, do I want to capture this knight? I've looked at this a few times in the game already. If I capture this knight, then h captures. And that might seem to be helping black, because black has then been able to undouble his h pawns, which are currently doubled and isolated. On the other hand, having this pawn there blocks off the semi-open g file towards my king. But even so, okay, next question, is this knight better or worse than this bishop? The board is fairly open. Quite a bit of material has come off. The knight can come in here, which kicks the rook but does nothing much else. But knight there combined with maybe rook to g8, I don't know. But then if I move my bishop, say back to c4, it's protecting g8 still. It stays on that diagonal. Let's do that. I think on balance, I like having this bishop on the board. Board's fairly open. My job right now, considering the story of the game, considering the way that the board looks, is attack. I need to be coming in, I need to be bringing my pieces in, so maybe knight to c5, bishop a6, possibly swap off bishop, so my knight or my rook could then come in. Okay, so he's come in and kicked the rook, which is what I expected. I'm just going to drop back. Yeah, that's safe. Knight can't come there. And the rook right now cannot come across to g8 because it will be captured. And there's no pawn now, because these pawns have advanced. There's no pawn that can block off that diagonal from my bishop. I think one of the most important practices in chess is to treat every game as though it's absolutely critical. I think there would be a nice option to be able to play against players without looking at their rating. And that will force you, that you might be playing an IM or you might be playing a beginner, right? But it will force you to approach every game in the same psychological state, with the same exact approach. I think that might be an interesting way to proceed. What options does black have at this point in time? This king is stuck in the middle of the board. Okay, now I'm quite tempted now. Okay, couple of ideas. Right, first idea, bishop takes, followed by pawn takes, opens up, so we then lose the d7 pawn because it's come over to the e file. I can then put a rook on that file to back up my very advanced pawn on d6. Option B is to play my knight to c5, hitting his knight. Then if he takes, I take back. I have now undoubled my pawns, and I would then have pawns on b, c and d, which again is good. So I'm going to try that approach. I'm going to see what happens. I would like him to capture, and then I would recapture on b4. Sorry, with my b4 pawn on c5. I definitely want to bring one of my rooks onto the d file at some point to back up this fellow. Okay. There's only one way to recapture, so I'm not even going to think. I've already thought it through. Now thinking about using my f pawn in some way. So h4, f5 attacks that loose pawn, that's undefended and very weak, but it also has options of e7 protected by this d pawn. Just kick the bishop. The ideal place for a knight right now would be somewhere like there on e6, which is currently covered by a pawn, but you know, I'm always going to be looking for forks with my knight on the board. Okay, let's go in with the knight. I've got b4 as well, because this pawn is actually pinned. This pawn is technically pinned. If it captures, then rook takes rook, and it would be pretty much the end of the game. At the moment I have an extra knight. Pawns are actually equal on the board, we've all got 7 pawns. But I think these h pawns are not long for this world, because it's very hard to defend these doubled isolated pawns. Okay, I think I'm just going to push b3 anyway. Oh, then a3. Is that going to upset me? Can always swing another rook round there. So I'll play b4. He can take en passant if he wants. If he does, it's losing because he drops his rook. If he advances, I'm going to play rook to e2 to a2, and then that pawn will be mine, because there's no way for this bishop to defend it. Okay, blunder, capture. This pawn might make a dash for the line, but it's not going to get very far. So I've got maybe rook to b1, captures, then to b8, putting too much pressure on this bishop. king can't move right now. The king can't go to e8 because I'll just grab the bishop. Okay, and there we go. A bit of resignation. So we'll go back to the start of the game and let's look at the early issues, the early exchanges, and see how you can beat 800 rated players. Right? e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, the Scotch game, and then a quiet move. I don't like this move f6. You know, the people say never move the f pawn for a reason. The f pawn is sometimes called the forget about it pawn, and one reason is it's opened up this diagonal towards the king. Yes, it's defending this pawn, but really on this previous move, black should have captured on d4, then made probably knight captures, and he would have been kind of okay. But I think with this move, it then allows d5, kicking the knight. Well, will kick the knight. This was the first big mistake of the game. This was a blunder, really, because c3 has now got 2 attacked pieces. He didn't think that through. It's only 20 seconds into a 20-minute game. There are, you know, really no reason to put yourself into this kind of situation with 2 attack pieces this early on. So he really was on the back foot from the start. But what can you take away from this? If you want to beat players in the 800 to 900 range, expect them to make blunders, right? You stick to your opening principles, okay? Gain that tempo. So I think, you know, a good move from me here was this d5 move, because it's a forcing move. That knight has now got to do something. So black has already moved the knight once. The fact that I'm allowed to play d4 means that black is going to either have to move the knight again or lose it. Okay, in the end he moves it away but loses his bishop. Okay, your opponents will make those kinds of errors. So if there's one tip I want you to take away from this game is, don't rush your openings. Far too many beginners rush their openings. Okay, this guy's used less than 1 minute and he's already in a losing position in the game. So think in general terms. If you're playing 20 minutes, then you want to spend at least 5 minutes on the opening. So that's developing your pieces, castling your king. Right? That then gives you still plenty of time for the middle game, still plenty of time for the end game. Right? Rushing the openings is such a common error, because you know you really can, even in the first 3 or 4 moves, you can find yourself on the back foot, having your pieces chased around the board while your opponent develops their pieces and starts to control everything. Okay, so don't do that. And if you ever find yourself in this situation, capture the damn pawn. It's as simple as that. Okay, black captures the pawn there and he's okay. This was the beginning of the end, really, for black in this game. So hope that's been useful for you. Hope you've got a few tips you can take away. See you next time.